Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Brian, Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
Hello.
Hello. Miss Berlin is at a concert with her son, and I told her that you should go to that because we're just a podcast and those kinds of things you'll remember forever. So, like I said, I try to be a benevolent dictator, if you will. So she'll be joining us next week. We got some topics that she'll be doing that will be very interesting for us to do. So we're recording on Saturday night because tomorrow is the finale of Game of Thrones, and I don't want to miss it, and I don't want to shortchange Mr. Betcher with his opportunity to do podcasts. So, are you watching Game of Thrones, sir?
No.
Oh man, really?
Really?
It gets better after the first season. There's less, sex. So, less weird sex too. So, yeah. So, yeah, looking forward to that, and getting to see what happens with the rest of the cast. So, I actually didn't start watching it until like season 5, and I had to binge 20, 30 episodes. So, but it was very enjoyable. So,
will there be a reunion episode in 10 years?
I don't know. I do know that they're doing a documentary the following week, so it'll be a couple hours of that. I think it's the same weekend as Memorial Day here in the U.S. On that weekend. So, all right. So let me see. I want to do this first. So we have an update from last week. We talked about password hashes and some of the stuff that I was doing as being a real hacker and stuff. And one of our slackers had wrote back to me and he was like, "Hey, maybe you could have made your password cracking a lot easier." And I was like, "Oh yeah, how so?" And he said that if you pulled the hashes off of the system correctly, there's actually two 32-character hash values. And the first one is, what did he say? It was like once the hash, depending on how it pulls, it will be typically 32 or 64 characters with a colon in between two sections. First section is an empty hash, which is required to do past the hash. However, the second half after the colon is the NTLM hash, which you could use directly for cracking. So he was, telling me how, and there's some links in our show notes to a site that uses secretsdump.py to recreate the hash values. And if you pull the second bit of that full hash, then you can do things like, cracking it. So let me pull that up. Securus Global, I think, was the site with that. Yeah. So I had actually found this site, but I didn't bother going all the way down to look at the information that was in there. So he said you can crack the LM. It says you can crack the LM hashes, if any, using oftcrack. Check the NT hashes using JTR. Found out that John the Ripper, the newest versions of that, the jumbo version, will use FPGAs now, which is something that's taken them 6 years to do. 600 commits, 80 developers, so that you can use your ASIC, your flipped, was it FPGA? Shit. I saw it today just afternoon. I hate to go on a tangent with you, Mr. Betcher. I know you were like, "Oh, we didn't plan on this." Field programmable gate arrays. So that's the stuff that, all the Bitcoin people like using, other than GPUs because they're faster for computing hashes.
What is that? It's not in a GPU. What is that? Quantum computers or what?
No, he said, according to Wikipedia, they're saying these are field programmable. They're they use specific hardware description languages, ASIC, application specific integrated circuits. So they're integrated circuits.
It's a piece of hardware.
It's a piece of hardware. Yeah.
Okay.
You can put a bunch of them together and then control them using like a Raspberry Pi to increase your cracking of the Bitcoins and the blockchains and hodl Lambos everywhere kind of thing, making it rain with the Lambos or whatever. So.
Right. So it's like those Bitcoin mining rigs that they advertised, and you could only pay in Bitcoin, and it took 8 weeks to ship it. So
right.
I guess they would use it for 7 weeks with your money, and then they would ship it after 7 weeks when it was useless.
Yeah.
At that point, because the hashing gets harder as
Right.
time goes on, as more are mined.
Yep.
It gets harder. So
Yep.
they'll mine with a thing you bought for 7 weeks, and then after the 7th week, they would ship it to you when it's no longer as useful as it once was.
That's hilarious.
That was a
Yeah.
whole scheme.
Yeah, but apparently you can use John the Ripper with these things to gain an edge on at least some of the hashes out there, like SHA-256 and those. I guess I'll have to go hunt up the show note link that I have from Feedly that I pulled out for that. So, yeah. Sorry to go on a rant there. So, but yeah, so his, where is it? Thomas Henry, one of our slackers, hooked me up with that information and told me that I may have been cracking those hashes incorrectly. So,
well, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in the attack side, then yeah, you should definitely learn about crypto and cracking hashes and all that, and the different types and what you need to do in order to get, I guess, full use out of your rig.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he said if you're using Hashcat, you'd want to use M-M1000. If you have the full 65 character hash because of the colon, you can use the Metasploit module SMB_login with the hash in the password field in order to see where that account has access. If it has admin access, then you can use PSExec. So if I was still on that engagement, and that was one of the things he was like, hey, you still have access to those boxes. I was like, no, those are gone, but I will definitely try to set up something here in my own office. And then of course I bricked my server, I think, when I flashed the updated BIOS, and now it's just sitting over there in a Hulk. So I'm kind of very unhappy about that, but I'm deciding on whether or not to get a new server. So
okay. Speaking of tangents,
go ahead.
That is a pen test, right? That you did?
Well, it was an internal network pen test. Yes, we were supposed to act like we're bad guys and do the things.
Okay, so sort of like a red team thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you had to issue a report, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm still waiting for a customer to come back telling me that my report sucks, because it was me and like 3 other testers, and I was being an IC in this case, an individual contributor. So I was actually helping with some of the testing.
So if your company's big enough to have a red team, they need to issue reports whenever they do their thing, right? So they get an initiative and they say, okay, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z. Now this is internal to them.
Right.
They do that, and then I guess they high five each other and move on to the next thing, right?
Well, I mean, it depends on what the objective was. If they're just, hey, here's a thing, let's poke at it for a bit. If they have some kind of carte blanche to be able to do so, I would say as an internal red team, I would have a deliverable, because yes, you owned all these things, but how do you? The report or your testing needs to, show that something happened or something didn't happen in this case. And to be able, if something bad did happen, that you can express that risk in some kind of deliverable, because you may give it to your boss, and your boss's boss is looking for something, and if you you're going to have to deliver something to somebody, if you're red team. I mean that's my opinion. I'm sure there's people out there yelling at me, telling me I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but
the end goal should be to actually increase defenses, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're supposed to You're supposed to be the independent third party, but it's not always the case when you're an internal red team. You kind of have to, there's some there's some politicalness in some of the things that you find, because if they're not ready for that ugly part of that baby to come out, then you may have to explain how to mitigate it. I think that's where the important thing of being why an independent third party or an independent pen testing company coming in and doing that is better, because the company's expecting that. Internal pen testers may be a little more hamstrung, or maybe restricted more than a third party. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you trying to segue into something? Because Leviathan is trying to build out, my company is trying to build out a red team as well for additional engagements. So in addition to our normal testing. So if you're interested in that, we do have a link in our Slack for the job board, but I can also put a link in the show notes to our job description. It's not a junior position.
What's the difference?
For what?
You said Leviathan's getting into that. Well, what's the difference between that and what they already do?
Oh, well, I can read you some of the job description. You can understand. Yeah, here, hang on. All right, so open positions, red team practice lead. So we believe the Attack MITRE framework will provide foundations required to provide meaningful insights about the efficacy of security controls and the resilience of information systems. We're seeking a leader and mentor to establish and help establish a service line focused on providing our clients with data required to make measured improvements to the security operations. I thought you could just
give me a one-liner.
Oh, apologies.
Like the difference between the pen test and the red team third party.
Yeah. Well, this practice lead is going to be creating methodologies to, I guess, evaluate existing controls in place. Thank you, honey. It's so we're going to be using the attack framework to help with traditional pen testing and also maybe to have like maybe staff aug kind of thing. So there's a fair bit of travel on this. So you'd go into the company, you'd be, an insider, or you'd do more I think it's probably internal pen tests versus, web app or API or REST stuff. So. Gotcha. Yeah. Anyway. Thank you for allowing me to do that segue there. I appreciate that. My boss will appreciate that too, Chad. Yes. But yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes to our discussion for that. It's definitely not a junior position. So if you're looking to make a move or something, let us know. Send me an email on bds.podcast and I'll send your information along. So, all right. So we have some discussions. We have a couple of news stories and we're also going to talk about some vulnerabilities that were found and how you might help defend against these things. A lot of news came out about the wormable, they called it wormable, RDP vulnerability. Apparently, it's 2019 and people have not found out that RDP is bad to have exposed to the internet.
It's one of the worst things you could have. In fact, when we do an engagement, we look for RDP. That's one of the first things, if not the first things.
Yep. So
we scan for externally, and then we work our way in from there.
So on the 14 May, Microsoft released as part of Patch Tuesday, they call it Critical Remote Execution Vulnerability, which is 2019-0708. In remote desktop services, formerly known as terminal services. I loved terminal services. Now, the interesting thing is, if you're running Windows 10 in your environment and something better than 2008 R2, you're supposedly not vulnerable because I believe they have set by default network NLA, network level authentication. But if you're running even older versions, and this was one of the odd things, they actually issued patches for Windows XP on this, which shows you how old this bug is, and it's been in there for a while. They said vulnerable systems include also Windows 7, Server 2008 and R2, Windows Server 2003, of course. I don't believe it says 8 and 10 are not affected. There's no coincidence that later versions are unaffected. And it is no coincidence that later versions, they invested heavily in strengthening the security of their products. And these were improvements that were not possible to backport to earlier versions of Windows. Okay, so when they busted backwards compatibility on 8 and 10 and servers 2012 and 2016 and 2019, these things didn't come up. So if you're running older versions of Windows, make sure that if you're running RDP on the internet that you're not running RDP. They said a mitigation on this is, of course, to, add network level authentication to your system. So if you have a 2003 box on the internet, fix that. And, when this came out, we were on Slack, as Mr. Betcher is often want to do as well as I. And, I was like, nobody's running 2003 or XP on the internet. And somebody, of course, said, yeah, I have a customer that's doing that right now. And I was like, oh, God, that's not a good day for any service provider doing that. So.
Right. And this has been a problem for quite some time because it's in XP, right? So this is fascinating because you find something that's been a bug. It's not like they released it last year. It's a bug. It's only been a bug for a year. It's been a vulnerability for what, a decade or two?
Yeah, XP came out in 2001-ish. I mean, and depending on when this was added, if it was added after Service Pack 2 or Service Pack 3 possibly, or whatever, it could be, it's at least a decade old, So
that it's like, wow, who knew about this way back then?
Oh, yeah.
Because they were super hacker for the last 10 years. I know that people searched blogs and other things on the internet for the what was it called, the shell shock vulnerability, and that had been a bug for decades as well in Linux,
right? And
they found some people talking about it from years and years ago before that vulnerability came out, and it was kind of fascinating. So I wonder if they'll do the same thing with this.
Yeah, I'm sure that they're at least looking for, they're looking at the patches because Patch Tuesday came out. So I'm sure they're looking at the patches for that and trying to figure out where the fix has been. There's the other thing that I found interesting was there was a number of GitHub repos that were being created with what appeared to be exploit code. So there was a number of them, and people were actually tracking these things on Twitter going, oh, here's another one that popped up, or oh, here's another one that popped up. And some of them were actually fake GitHub repos that had like fake code in them, or, links to, Rickrolling and stuff. Cause it was like, for some reason, everybody wanted to, find a proof of concept or code for this. So I found that it was interesting and different to see that kind of thing happen with this vulnerability. So let me ask. Let's come, back to company X that actually needs to have RDP running for whatever reason, and it happens. How, other than setting up network level authentication, because that's a gimme that they need to do that to at least mitigate it. Let's say they have a Windows 2003 server box. That's not easy to upgrade. It's got it's a latchkey system. It's very important, business critical. And we need to allow World plus Dog to have RDP access to it. How would you go about securing that?
VPN. Gateway, jump box, something in between.
Right.
I mean, wow.
Yeah. I would definitely think proxies. I found a link from, of all places, berkeley.edu, security.berkeley.edu, and they have resources on their site on how to secure RDP for system administrators. It's not bad. There's a gentleman, he says, special thanks to Forrest Smalley of IST for providing content and screenshots for this article. So good job, Forrest. Go for it. Go for it. Yeah, Forrest kicking an ass. So says
this is actually a really good article.
It's not bad. I mean, there was only one real weird thing that I was surprised was on here. We're going to go through a few of these. Of course, use strong passwords, update your software. Restrict access using firewalls, use firewalls to restrict access. And of course, enable network level authentication. It says Windows Vista 7 and 2008 server. And this was written obviously a little while ago. They do mention down here enabling on 2012 server, Windows 8 and Windows 10. So this isn't, it's, maybe 2, 3, 4 years old, but it's not bad. They say NLA should be enabled by default on 2012 server, Windows 8 and Windows 10. Which helps mitigate, like what we talked about with the vulnerabilities. And it says to check, you may look at group policy setting, require user auth for remote connections by using NLA, found in computer policies, Windows components, remote desktop services, remote desktop session host, and security. So it's a group policy that you can push out to all your boxes. If you're running GPOs or not, there's also, you could also use PowerShell to push that out to your boxes if need be. And there's a TechNet article on how to enable NLA if you're running 2008 server. limit users who can log into RDP. It may not always be possible. One of the things I would suggest is if you can't limit the users, limit the permissions the user has when they log in. So don't allow them to be local admin, make them, just a user who can't install anything. Mr. Betcher, you mentioned jump box, having some kind of proxy. They have to log into this box and then they proxy through to that other box. That makes complete and total sense. Let's see. Yeah.
Well, they say using RDP or PC Anywhere is not recommended, but you can do local security logs and monitor those. So that's a big plus for this article.
Yep. Setting
monitor
up logs,
those.
Right.
Anything funky, like login attempts from the local administrator. Also, you could use laps as well.
Restricted groups, setting your place. Your techies will still have administrative access remotely, but using the steps above, you've removed the problematic local admin account, having RDP access. Going forward, whenever new machines were added, I think some of this is probably, berkeley.edu specific, but they said going forward, whenever new machines are added into the OU under the GPO, your settings will be correct. So, setting up a restricted user or restricted group, software restriction policy so that if somebody does gain access to the box, they can't just install software. Of course, there are ways around that. If anything that doesn't require UAC to be ran. So if you can get a zip file to run, or portableapps.com back in the day where you could get a browser or something put on there. Python will also run in a minimal zip file. Let's see, account lockout policy is always good. So if, somebody's attempting to do a brute force or something like that, have a lockout policy. And
then get alerted when it is locked out. Absolutely.
Yeah. If only there was an application I knew of that, would allow you to help set that up. I don't know of one.
Me too. If only.
Yeah.
So also, if let's say you have access to a server that does have RDP, because you have to do that, you and maybe a handful of other people.
Right.
Well, set up alerts so you get a text or an email whenever you log in.
Yep.
Whenever your account log in, rather.
Right.
So that way, at 2 a.m. when you're asleep, you get this text and you're like, well, I didn't log in.
Oh,
then you have something to miss.
Yep. The only really interesting and a little bit, off on this was they said change the listening port for remote desktop. It doesn't take much. We have talked about security by obscurity, changing port numbers for known services. So, you can move it off of 3389, but that's not going to stop them forever. You can make it 33,389 or something like that. They will find that. All they have to do is scan the host for any port and find those.
It'll get rid of the skitties, but if you do some of these other things, you don't have to worry about them anyway.
Right. So RDP Gateways, I don't think I've ever used one of these. It looks like it says tightly restrict access to RDP while supporting remote connections through a single gateway service. So it's a jump box, I think, or Bastion or something like that. Requests go over HTTPS. Of course, your HTTPS should be using the highest level TLS that you can use. So TLS 1.2 in this case. Let me see. Tunnel remote connections through IPsec or SSH. That's another great way of doing it. If you can't use a VPN, or, I would, like you said, use a VPN if you can. That would be the best way to do it, but that may not be, possible in all cases. Find some way to send, PuTTY or P-Link or something out to your customers if you need to, and then
typically firewalls will have that option. So
what? Oh,
for VPNs.
Yeah, if you put a VPN in front of it, you could definitely set up a VPN type connection.
Firewall, you mean? Yeah.
Right. Use existing management tools for RDP logging configuration. It says using other components like VNC or PC Anywhere are not recommended. As a matter of fact, what was that? TeamViewer got popped in 2016 and was not letting anybody know. So these kinds of technologies do get popped. VNC is really awful because there's no encryption for that connection, which is why you often run VNC over an SSH connection. For additional.
Michael set up a alert in our organization back in the company we worked before to alert on anybody who connected via TeamViewer, because every TeamViewer session talks to the mothership,
right?
In somewhere in Europe, I forgot where it was.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So, in theory, there could be loss of data if you use TeamViewer, because it always talks to the headquarters.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because one has to reach back out, and then you're reaching back to their servers and making the connection.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not a true peer-to-peer.
Right.
I mean, I guess it is, but there's some communication to a third party.
Right. So, okay, well, where's the crap? I lost the slide. I was actually looking up what network access protection was, which is the last thing that they talk about implementing here. It said it's a Microsoft technology for controlling network access of a computer based on its health. Sounds like you would use for IP tables or whatever. They said the most recent operating computers with NAP client will have their health status evaluated upon establishing a network connection. NAP can restrict or deny network access to computers that are not in compliance. Sounds like a VPN thing where it does a host check to make sure you've got all your patches and that you're running everything. And then, of course, Wikipedia tells me NAP was deprecated in server 2012 R2 and removed altogether in server 2016. So, but it's still technically a possibility if you're running older Windows Server versions that you could implement, checks to make sure that clients, touching the systems are, good. Let me see. What was the last bit? Two-factor auth. Yes. Having some kind of two-factor auth is always a good thing if you can do that. Gateways do provide a simple mechanism for controlling authentication via two-factor based smart cards, or you can also use YubiKeys, apparently. So that's nice.
If you want something you can put on your resume, set up two-factor authentication somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's sexy. It's real sexy.
Two-factor is a must in these kind of situations.
Right. So there's a lot you can do if you have to expose RDP to world plus dog. It just takes a little bit of effort and explaining to people, and it's looks like all based in Windows. So if you do have to have that open and running, then you have that option. So this is in the show notes if you're interested in checking this out. But yeah, using something like PC Anywhere or TeamViewer is not good. And there's some fairly cheap and effective methods by which you can get around that. As a matter of fact, tunneling remote desktop connections through SSH. If you're using Windows 8 or Windows 10 or something like that, you could just install the Windows subsystem, which they're coming out with the new version 2 very shortly, which will have a small Linux kernel, but it's a fully functional open SSH server, so you'll be able to do port forwarding or whatever, just like you would with a regular Linux box. So that's always an option for your systems there. All right. Let me see. One last news story. So how many of you use Elasticsearch? Raise your hands. If you're driving, don't. Okay. So say what now? No,
both hands?
Yeah, don't do both hands unless you're driving a Tesla and then immediately put them back on the steering wheel. So according to Bleeping Computer, it says an unsecured survey database exposes info of 8 million people, which, I don't know if I'm becoming, jaded and stuff with all the
it's only 8 million. Come on.
Right. I loaded.
Why are we even talking about this?
We just got done talking about RDP and stuff, and an article or an ad on Bleeping Computers came up about TeamViewer being hacked. So that was kind of funny. Anyway, so they had an unsecured database. It was Elasticsearch database, which for those of you who don't know what Elasticsearch is, it's a data store that is used, and you can gain access to the information on Elasticsearch by REST APIs and such. It also
it's a GUI that you can query the database.
I don't think
Elasticsearch is.
It might have a GUI. I'm not sure. It's anytime you hear about elk stacks, that's the E for elk, ElasticSearch, Logstash, and Kibana. So those are, that's the E and elk, or, whatever system you're using for storing that information and being able to pull it up. And I'm sure there's some fancy dashboards and such. But so according to the system here, 8 million people were offered free product samples, a chance to enter sweepstakes or prizes by filling out a survey. So you had to provide personal information. This company, actually this person, Sanyam Jain, Jain, independent security researcher, member of GDI Foundation, discovered the unsecured database, exposing personal information of 8 million people who submitted entries to these sites. So let's see, user, zip, country, gender, city, state, address, last name, is super admin, is admin. I wonder what you could do with that. Phone, date of birth, state, email, all that stuff was, how to contact them. So yeah, awesome. They also include the referrer page where the information was submitted from. So there's a number of different sites doing this stuff. And some of the survey examples were, click here to enter to get $12,000 in cash. So you had to fill out these surveys. Ultimately, I don't think anybody won, I would imagine. The only people who did win was the folks who got the information harvested. So.
Right. Oh, so when it says unsecured database, what does unsecured mean? They didn't have a gateway or a two-factor authentication?
It seems like that there was no authentication required. You could just run a REST command or something to get to it.
So no passwords, no anything.
Yeah, I was going back through here and making sure that was the case. Yeah, it doesn't exactly say if there was no authentication or if it was poor authentication or what have you. But unsecured for me is almost like how you hear with S3 buckets when they're open. So you have you can just view it by going to it. So it says here that they also had issues getting a hold of whatever shady company had this database. So they ended up having to go to Amazon, who gave them the information they needed to find out how to get a hold of the organization. Yeah, when researchers find exposed databases, in many cases they never receive response, or if they do, the companies are typically not appreciative, efficient with an I, so it's efficient. Wow. Yuck. On the other hand,
kind of iffy, right?
Yeah, they are efficient, yeah. On the other hand, told us they appreciated the work of the independent researchers trying to secure data found on the internet. Quote, we're grateful for any information pertaining to our data security, including information shared here. We take privacy seriously, yeah. Our investigation related to this matter and efforts to notify potentially affected individuals were undertaken immediately upon receiving the information here and are ongoing. So there you go. So this ended up somewhat okay. It was just really hard to get a hold of these folks, so they went to Amazon to get the information. So, and actually, they said 8 million people's information was leaked, but this researcher found 130 million additional records in the database. The number of people affected is much smaller due to the number of duplicate records.
Oh, so you could win $12,000 and other monthly prizes. You multiply your odds by entering again and again and again.
Yeah, You enter a couple of hundred times, you've got a better chance of winning. And I use that quotey fingers because nobody probably won. So we have some information like we did with the RDP stuff, trying to figure out how you configure security for ElasticSearch. This is directly from elastic.co, which is what appears to be the company that makes ElasticSearch. they have everything I found about authentication. They stated, so they said authentication is possible. There's add-ons that you can have added to it using Python scripts to add things like basic authentication, which it's awful. Yeah, you don't really want to use basic auth because there's really no way of stopping anybody from running, several 100,000 requests or checks against a brute force of the passwords that you have or whatever. There are controls you could put into place, like fail to ban or whatever, if you were monitoring the log files properly, where it would lock the IP address possibly. But yeah, it's a little rough. Let me find the link that I was looking at. Brief overview of running Elasticsearch securely. They say prevent usage of script feature for arbitrary execution of code. They say that Elasticsearch has no concept of a user. So that's interesting to me. That's what kind of got me with this. Essentially anyone that can send arbitrary requests to your cluster is a quote super user unquote.
I don't know enough about it.
I need to do a little more research on it. I'm sure people in our SIM channel can help us out with that. But they said Elasticsearch does not consider authentication or authorization to be its job. Elasticsearch has no concept of a user. Essentially, anyone can send arbitrary requests to your cluster. As a super user, it's reasonable limitation to impose. There are so many ways to implement various authentication and authorization schemes. Many of them are closely coupled with the application domain. So the idea is you're not supposed to necessarily put Elasticsearch on the web like an S3 bucket. It's just supposed to store things, but the idea is you're not supposed to leave it exposed out there. So, like the S3 buckets, this is supposed to lay behind, 7 firewalls and your application layer and your web layer and all that stuff and be called by your fancy ass web application. So yeah, but there are ways of doing it. You can put in a proxy. They suggest putting in a proxy if you're going to have to set it up like an S3 bucket. Scripting without dynamic scripts, I would say probably putting in some kind of restrictions for users. Let me pull that up, that other document that I have here. There's you can do a reverse proxy, so you could proxy your connections through a proxy, kind of like how we did with the jump boxes on RDP. All your connections will go through that and make sure it's correct. The Elastic Company.co actually has an authentication mechanism or an add-on called Shield, not to be confused with the Avengers Shield, that you can use to enable LDAP authorization. It's a security plugin for Kibana and Elasticsearch made by Elasticsearch. Has native support for session management, encrypted comms, role-based access control, and audit logging. But good news, it costs money. Pricing for an Elastic Cloud subscription starts at $45 a month and includes Shield. So sounds like the only way you can get access to this additional security is by paying for it and using the Elastic Cloud subscription service. So not the best way of adding security by having to pay extra for it. A lot of companies may balk on that. But yeah. There's also, I saw a couple Reddit articles where they were like, yeah, you can set up an LDAP server to do LDAP-based authentication. If you're doing LDAP-based authentication, you may be able to sync your LDAP server with Active Directory, for instance, and do proper authentication that way. Or if you have Google authentications or something, because once you set up LDAP and everything, you could probably set up 2-factor as well if that was something necessary. So yeah, there's a lot of good information on here. The mapper.com link that we have in our show notes talks about how to set up HTTP basic authentication if you really needed to do that. The only thing I would add after you did the basic auth, if it was required to have that open, was to put in, fail to ban or deny hosts or something like that would, or, set up IP tables. My friend Joel at work showed us ways you can use IP tables to do rate limiting or to block, unnecessary connections. I'd really like to have him come on the show and talk about that, because it was a really interesting training he gave for us, using Berkeley packet filter and IP tables together to almost act like an endpoint security solution, like because the kernel doesn't have regex in it, so you can make add-ons to take like your snort rules if you put regexes inside your kernel, and then take various strings that you would get for, say, authentication packets, and if it's not coming from a place you're used to or whatever, you can actually use IP tables to block traffic coming that way. So maybe I'll see if Joel wants to come on the show and talk about that. But it was a very interesting training he gave us the other day. Anywho, well, you know what? There's a lot more to talk about with Elasticsearch. If there's anybody out there who considers themselves an expert in Elasticsearch security, feel free to hit us up. We'd love to go a little more deeper on this. We've been doing what seems like a lot of DevOps stuff this year, talking about containers and Docker and these things. And this seems like another good thing we could talk about with, storage of data, or, because a lot of people use this stuff to store threat intelligence data or store, things that they can query on later. So we'd be interested in having you on. So there you go. Mr. Betcher, do you have any other thoughts, questions, suggestions, things to talk about?
Don't think so.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, where to find you on the internet.
Well, I do a lot of things. I namely work for a large company, doing engagements, things like that. I have a tool that I work on, kind of develop with Michael Goff. And so I'm diligently working on that. We are done with the next version, so that's good. We're going to release soon. So we've quit adding stuff, because as we go on these engagements, we say, oh, wow, we need this. And
right.
So we add it.
Right.
And that takes time. Oh, we need to add this too, because blah, blah, blah. And then we add that, and that takes some more time. So we finally reached sort of a stopping point now. So it is battle tested.
Oh, nice. Okay. What's some of the new stuff that's come out in this major release?
In this one, mainly some pro stuff, like, what have we added? Remote access report looks at all the connections coming in and out, and like RDP.
Nice.
Perfect example.
Oh, okay.
You can do it from the source or the destination. So that comes out in that report. It has been a while since we've released one. So there's a lot of features that I can't even remember, because it was probably 3 to 6 months ago when we added them. There is one that we haven't tested yet that I added. It's going to be an offline log. So you can download some logs and run LogMD against them. But right now we haven't worked out all the kinks, so it'll kind of be a hidden feature in this next version.
Very cool.
So yeah, offline logging is in there.
Nice.
Lots of other things that we fixed. And,
and there's a free version.
I didn't have a list of things that we added, but yeah, anybody that's downloaded the free version, they'll get an email when it comes out.
Nice.
To download. Okay.
All right. So how would people get a hold of you guys if they wanted to talk to you about LogMD or whatever? Yeah, that's on. Well, we do have a Slack channel. Yep. As part of breaking down security, and also log-md.com. And my Twitter is @Betcherpwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. Yep. Did you go to B-Sides San Antonio recently too? I haven't. No. Oh, okay. Well, I thought one of us or both of us or somebody was going to B-Sides San Antonio or Austin. Maybe that was Miss Megan. But She likes it
Yeah,
when we
Megan went to Austin.
Okay.
She may have went to San Antonio as well.
She likes it when we mention Ms. Roddy on the show. She's one of our moderators on our Slack. She's an awesome lady. So yeah, Miss Berlin is doing the Hackers Health on Twitter. She's doing conference villages for people who want to do talks on mental health. She's quick to tell people that she's not a mental health professional, but you think of it like AA or self-help groups where you get together and you talk about your issues or what works for you or whatever. If you're interested in having one of those at your conference, you can contact her at Hackers Health on Twitter, or she's also on Twitter at InfoSister, INFOSYSTIR. Megan Roddy is also one of our Slack moderators, and she's on the board for that. So if you're interested in reaching out, you can get a hold of her as well. Her Twitter handle escapes me at the moment. I think it's Megan Roddy, but I could be wrong. I'll put it in the show notes and make sure that we get that added as well. So, I'm doing a lot as well. In addition to doing a weekly podcast with Mr. Betcher and Miss Berlin, our tickets for our conference up here, the InfoSec Campout, has gone on sale. So we're having 2 nights of camping. If you're interested in coming to the Seattle area, we have a nice camping venue. You can set up a tent. Come in on Saturday. We'll have potentially some workshops. We're still looking for sponsors and workshops. I think we're good on volunteers, surprisingly, because I think we've got about 6 people now for volunteers. If you're interested in coming, it is InfoSec Campout, all one word.com. You can go to the GitHub page that Ms. Wendy Knox Everett created for us. It's a labor of love because I'm actually learning how to use markdowns to update the web page and using GitHub for reals. I'm coding all the things, man. I love it. Wow. So, yeah, tickets went on sale. We've already sold out of our super attendee tickets, which were our special tickets. Somebody's going to get, those 5 people are going to get special items for the conference. We're going to be in a gigantic barn with concrete floor and seats, and we're going to have some talks from 3 to 8 p.m. on Saturday, the 24th of August. And then people can come in the night of the 23rd on Friday and camp. And then the 24th is our workshops and conference. And then you can camp the night of the 24th. And then on the 25th, you got to get the hell out by noon. So we're trying something. People are saying it's a bit avant-garde. It's not tour camp. One of the failed slogans that Matt Domko, one of my board my board people, said, if it sucks, then you can drive home. So we're not out in the boonies like tour camp, but we're not trying to be tour camp. So there you go.
It's not a lock-in.
It's not a lock-in. No. We've got a ton of information on InfoSecCampout.com. Just talking about it, and it's making me all sweaty and stuff because I hope it works. I feel like Inigo and Fezzik. Inigo, I hope we win. So I'm just hoping that something happens, and So we'll have T-shirts. We're looking at food options. We have a call for papers if you're wanting to come and speak. We can't guarantee money for you to come and visit yet until we get some sponsors. If you're wanting to be a sponsor and throw some money at us, we would love to talk to you, and we can supply you with whatever information you need. So. I apologize for this being so lengthy. It won't be the last time you hear it. And you can shut it off at this point if you'd like. But yeah, so we also have a Twitter, an official Twitter. It's going to be very low bandwidth, low threshold, low messages at InfoSec Campout, all one word. And this is at least sponsored by Brakesec Podcast, but it's pretty much out of our own pockets here. So we'd appreciate it if people want to come and give us some money. We have sponsor levels if you're interested in also finding out what you can do. If you pay enough, you can actually have naming rights to the venue during the conference or to the campsites. So let's say Symantec decided to throw down, a couple $1,000, they could have the Symantec campsite number 14 or whatever, that kind of thing. So, I thought it was kind of funny, but we'll see. Anyway, getting back to the matter at hand, you can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake, BryanBrake. You can follow the podcast officially, Brakesec, Brakesec. And if you're in Seattle, I also do a local meetup called InfoSec East. First Wednesday of every month, we go and do we go to a local restaurant in the Bellevue, Renton, well, it's not Renton, actually, it's more Bellevue and Redmond areas. And get together, nice leisurely, chill atmosphere. People can talk and joke and do things. And then sometimes we'll have a venue where we have talks. Like last month, we had a talk with Jay Beal, who talked about Kubernetes security. We had him on the show just recently talking about Kubernetes security. So he kind of reprised some of that. He was talking about his damn vulnerable Kubernetes instance. So that's what damn vulnerable DVKI, I think, something like Diviki. Anyway. So if you're interested in that, we're on Twitter at CSEC East, SEASECEAST. There is a CSEC meetup as well. You can go and check them out on our Slack. I know Drew, he's a good dude. He's been starting doing things in Seattle proper. If you're interested in communicating and networking with other folks, we have a Slack. So you can join us. Invite is bds.podcast@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on Twitter at Brakesec, like I said earlier. And we'll get you an invite to that. So as if we don't have enough stuff left, book club is going on. So summer book club, David Sybuck is doing book club. He's taking a survey in our Slack. Currently, the survey going on, we're looking at doing either the Cuckoo's Egg or the Cult of the Dead Cow book. Those are both tied at 11 votes right now. Tribe of Hackers, which is a new book by that Marcus Carey and somebody last name of Jin put out, has 9 votes. We also have Breaking and Entering from Jeremy Smith. We Are Anonymous by Parmi Olson. Mastermind, Ratliff, and Cyber War by Richard Clark. Those are all of the ones we have on our survey right now. You can go in and vote once you join up. And I think June 4th is when that ends. We're going to be, they'll start reading in June is what they said. Okay. So, and one last thing, if you are looking to do red teaming, or you want to get better at your CTF skills for competitions, we have a CTF club. We just started that back up, second week in a row. One of our Slacker, Pinkie Pie, or PonySec on our Slack, is doing that today. It's on Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And he last week he did something on DLL injection. This week was library hijacking. Next week, he plans on having a speaker talking about something. I don't know what the topic is. I just invited that person to the Slack. So if you're interested in doing that, please feel free to get that invite and join us. Very, very helpful group, very educational, very entertaining kind of thing there. So, all right. I apologize for being so wordy. Most of you probably already stopped listening. But there you go. That was it for this week on Breaking Down Security. Mr. Betcher, it's been a pleasure as always talking to you, sir. I never get tired of hearing your dulcet tones.
Likewise.
Yes, thank you. And Miss Berlin will be back next week. We do miss her, but like I said, family comes first here at Brakesec World Headquarters. So that was it. I said, have a great week. Be kind to one another. Be nice to yourself because you're the only you have, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.